They came as conquerors, soldiers of an empire that stretched across constellations. To them, Earth was not a battlefield but a formality, a minor campaign meant to expand their dominion. Their dropships carved scars across the skies, and their armored ranks poured into valleys and cities with the calm arrogance of veterans who believed no primitive world could resist them. Their weapons glowed with the hum of contained plasma, each rifle capable of cutting through steel and stone as if either carried weight. To them, war had long been reduced to efficiency, precision, and numbers. They had mastered the art of overwhelming force, and humanity, in their eyes, would be no different from the countless civilizations crushed before. In their arrogance, they mocked the very tools that humans carried. Crude rifles, chambered with brass cartridges and designed for combustion-driven projectiles, seemed to the aliens nothing more than relics of a forgotten era. Captured weapons were displayed in alien camps like museum artifacts, objects unworthy of the title firearm. Their officers joked in their native tongues, calling them sticks that spit pebbles, laughing at the notion that such antiquated devices could stand against armor that had shrugged off laser storms and plasma barrages. Their broadcasts carried those words into occupied settlements, taunting survivors, demanding submission while ridiculing the weapons humanity still clung to. The aliens' contempt was not limited to words. Demonstrations were staged to mock the resistance. Soldiers fired upon human rifles in front of prisoners, showing how the alien armor rendered the rounds useless at close range. They crushed rifles under their boots, filmed the acts, and sent the recordings across occupied channels, declaring that human defiance was built on toys. Even the propaganda aimed at their own empire reinforced the same image. Earth was not a war, it was entertainment, a spectacle of outdated humans daring to resist inevitability. Yet beneath the noise of their mockery, silence was forming in the high places of the world. Far from the cities, beyond the reach of broadcasts, there were men and women who did not measure power in terms of plasma output or armor resistance. They knew the valleys, the ridges, the narrow passes where wind curled through the rocks like a living force. For them, rifles were not toys, but instruments of patience and precision. To the aliens, bullets were obsolete. To the sniper waiting in the mountains, they were timeless. The invaders had learned to dominate battlefields measured in wide plains and starships, but Earth's mountains whispered a different language. The air was thin, the cold bit through armor, and sight lines stretched farther than any plasma rifle could hope to match. What the aliens dismissed as inferior was forged for conditions exactly like these. Their sensors, tuned for heat signatures and rapid energy exchanges, struggled against the slow, deliberate pace of a rifleman who could remain motionless for hours. Their arrogance blinded them, and arrogance is the most fatal of weaknesses. They did not realize that every word of mockery carried back to human ears, stoking a fire that no technology could extinguish. When the Empire said that Earth's rifles were useless, men and women clutched them tighter, not as outdated relics, but as the last symbols of independence. In the hearts of the conquered, ridicule turned into fuel, and resistance hardened in secret. One weapon may have been called primitive, but in the hands of the patient, the skilled, and the determined, it would become something greater than the Empire ever imagined. What the aliens failed to see, in all the laughter, was that humanity had always fought wars with less and endured against more. They saw rifles as sticks, but they were blind to the will behind them, blind to the silence of a man in the high ground who measured war not by the number of soldiers, but by the distance of a single shot. And while the Empire mocked, somewhere in the mountains a rifle was already waiting, aimed through the wind, ready to carve the first fracture in their arrogance. The mountains had always been a refuge for those who understood patience. They were harsh, unforgiving, and vast enough to swallow entire battalions without leaving a trace. It was here that a single marksman carved his war. He did not march with armies, nor did he rally crowds. His struggle was measured in silence, in breath, in the weight of a trigger squeeze. To the Empire, he did not exist in their records. To those who whispered about him in occupied villages, he was already a ghost. He lived as part of the ridges themselves, moving with storms, vanishing with fog, returning with the sun's first light. His body was hardened by cold nights and long marches across stone that split boots and tore flesh. He carried no banners, no call signs, only a rifle polished by years of care. It was no relic to him, but a trusted tool, balanced to his shoulder, tuned with a craftsman's touch. While the Empire boasted weapons of glowing energy, his instrument was forged of steel and precision, built not for spectacle but for permanence. His rifle was his language, and every shot was a sentence written in silence. He knew how to read the air, how to measure the slight tug of a crosswind by the shift of grass or the sway of a branch. He adjusted not with machines, but with instinct carved from repetition. His weapon spoke in thunder only once he was certain of the outcome, and when it did, an armored invader fell lifeless to the earth, disbelief etched into the faces of those who thought themselves untouchable. The first kill was dismissed as coincidence. The aliens muttered about malfunctions, accidents, statistical improbability. Their armor, they insisted, could not be pierced by primitive munitions. Yet when another soldier crumpled days later, struck from a distance beyond their rifle's range, doubt began to ripple. He did not fire often. He waited, sometimes for days, watching through glass, studying patterns, learning which officers gave orders, which soldiers hesitated, which machines grew predictable in their routes. His patience was a weapon greater than the rifle itself. He did not strike for numbers. He struck for effect. One commander felled at the edge of a pass halted a column for hours. A sentry eliminated in silence forced an entire squad to retreat, fearing ambush. Each shot rippled through their ranks, stretching their paranoia, weakening their certainty. The Empire that had mocked his weapon found itself altering formations, slowing advances, committing drones and scanners to hunt a single figure hidden in the stone. What they could not comprehend was his endurance. He had grown with hardship as his only teacher, surviving on little, moving lightly, adapting as the environment shifted around him. Their machines hummed with energy but drained with every hour. His strength came from within, measured in discipline. To them, war was technology. To him, war was craft. He had no need to overpower, only to outlast. Stories of him began to spread quietly among his own people. Refugees whispered of a mountain hunter who struck fear into the invaders. Resistance fighters spoke of him as if he were more spirit than man, appearing where least expected, vanishing before any could reach him. For many, the mere rumor of his existence was enough to kindle courage, to remind them that the Empire could bleed. In every shot, he carried not just the weight of survival, but the voice of defiance. He was not fighting for glory, nor recognition, nor revenge. He fought because his homeland demanded someone who would not yield. And though the Empire laughed at rifles, though they dismissed them as primitive, the ghost in the mountains proved otherwise. His silence was louder than their broadcasts, and his rifle spoke a truth no propaganda could erase, that arrogance falls before patience, and even empires tremble at the sound of a single bullet carried on the wind. The Empire soon realized the deaths in the mountains were not random accidents. The patterns were undeniable. Officers struck while giving orders, scouts silenced the moment they stepped into open ground, patrols frozen by a single distant shot. A lone rifleman had done what no battalion of soldiers had managed. He forced an interstellar army to hesitate. Their arrogance had shielded them at first, but hesitation spread like a poison. Warriors who once mocked human weapons now scanned every ridge, flinched at every echo, and questioned every shadow. Commanders responded with technology. Swarms of drones buzzed over the valleys, heat scanners combed the ridges, armored vehicles swept through with blinding floodlights. The sniper adapted with silence. He moved after each shot, leaving no pattern, no trace. His rifle spoke and then vanished into stone and mist. Their scanners sought heat, but he cooled his barrel under snow and used the terrain to mask his form. Their drones circled endlessly, but they found only rocks, trees, and wind. Each countermeasure revealed their desperation, and every failure magnified his legend. Within the villages under occupation, his name was never spoken aloud, but the idea of him traveled faster than any message. Families whispered of the ghost in the mountains who hunted the invaders one by one. Fighters drew courage from his existence, their own rifles carried with renewed resolve. What had been mocked as obsolete became a symbol of defiance. Even weapons decades old, pulled from hidden caches, were raised with pride. The people no longer saw their tools as weak. They saw them as the same steel that echoed from the ridges. For the invaders, the psychological toll deepened. Entire patrols began refusing to venture beyond fortified zones without armored support. Orders were delayed as soldiers questioned the safety of every approach. Plasma rifles that once inspired fear felt inadequate against a bullet that struck unseen. The Empire's advantage of overwhelming firepower meant little against an enemy that could not be drawn into open battle. Their strength was numbers, but numbers faltered when soldiers hid behind one another, waiting for a shot they could not stop. Each day the sniper remained alive, the imbalance of power narrowed. What had begun as arrogance became frustration, then fear, and finally respect. Their officers no longer joked about rifles, instead, they cursed them. They cursed the silence of a weapon that spoke only once but spoke with finality. It was no longer dismissed as primitive, it was seen as an equalizer, one that stripped away the illusion of invulnerability. The sniper's influence extended beyond his own kills. Other fighters learned from his methods, breaking into smaller groups, using hit-and-fade strikes, choosing ambushes over direct clashes. The sound of rifles crackled more often across occupied ground. What had once been an isolated phantom became a movement. The Empire faced not one ghost in the mountains but dozens inspired by him, each willing to risk everything to remind the invaders that Earth would not bow. The commanders grew ruthless in their attempts to end it. Villages were burned, hostages taken, threats broadcasted of annihilation if the sniper did not surrender. Yet no figure appeared, and no plea was answered. The mountains gave nothing back. Their violence only hardened resistance further, as every act of cruelty made the rifleman's presence feel like justice rather than vengeance. What the Empire did not understand was that they were no longer fighting just a marksman. They were fighting an idea. An idea that rifles mocked as relics could humble an interstellar army. An idea that one man's patience could break through layers of technology. And once such an idea takes hold, it cannot be erased by fire or threats. It grows in silence, spreads in whispers, and fires in echoes across the hills. That was the war the sniper had created, and it was a war no empire was prepared to win. The Empire, humiliated by delays and losses, abandoned patience. What was once a campaign of swift domination turned into an obsession with crushing a single rifleman. Orders were issued to mobilize overwhelming force. Heavy walkers trudged into the passes, aircraft circled above, artillery batteries positioned themselves to blanket entire ridgelines in fire. It was not efficiency anymore. It was fury, the desperate desire of an empire to prove that no human could stand against them. Columns advanced under the roar of plasma cannons, scouring trees, rocks, and outcroppings. Forests ignited, stones shattered, and snow boiled into steam, yet no body was found. The riflemen moved unseen, shifting position before barrages struck. Every explosion filled the air with noise, but his silence endured. They destroyed mountainsides to eliminate a single man, and in doing so, revealed their fear to every soldier under their command. Then the rifle spoke again. Not at random, not as desperation, but with precision that mocked their entire offensive. A shot cracked through the roar of engines, and an officer directing troops from the safety of a carrier collapsed with a hole through his visor. The column halted, confusion spreading, and the Empire's firestorm seemed suddenly hollow. They could burn the land, but they could not silence the man who understood it better than they did. The battle for the pass became a struggle of will. Alien troops advanced cautiously, hiding behind walkers, using drones as their eyes, but one by one their machines fell. A single bullet to a fuel line sent a vehicle into flames, scattering soldiers. Another struck the optics of a drone mid-flight, rendering it blind before it crashed into the rocks. The rifle was never wasted, never rushed. Each round carried meaning, and each kill tore at their confidence. Resistance fighters, emboldened by his defiance, joined the fray. Hidden caches of rifles surfaced, shots echoed from ridges beyond his own, and the invaders faced fire from multiple directions. The Empire had come to crush one ghost, but found themselves surrounded by dozens of shadows, all born from his legend. What they had mocked had become an army's heart. Still, the riflemen remained the center of their terror. They launched wave after wave, but no force could pin him. He moved through snowfields, used avalanches to bury patrols, collapsed rocks onto convoys, and when they tried to close in, another shot reminded them of the futility. Each failure deepened their losses, and each delay sapped their morale. The Empire's pride had brought them into the mountains, but pride could not shield them from patience, nor save them from precision. One moment etched itself into every survivor. A commander, shielded by armored escorts, pointed skyward in rage, demanding the mountains be leveled entirely. Before his words reached his troops, the rifle cracked, and his body fell lifeless into the dust. The shot had crossed a distance thought impossible, bypassing armor, bypassing arrogance, leaving only silence. Soldiers froze, their courage broken, and many refused to advance further. That single bullet carried more weight than all the Empire's firepower. The past that was meant to become a show of dominance became their graveyard of pride. Walkers abandoned, artillery silent, drones scattered, nothing overcame the rifleman's will. The Empire had unleashed its full strength against one human, and strength had failed them. In the echoes of each shot, their invincibility crumbled, and the mountains declared a truth no plasma storm could erase: Earth would not be taken by arrogance. Defeat crept into the Empire's campaign like a shadow they could not dispel. What was meant to be a swift conquest had transformed into humiliation. The rifleman remained unbroken, and the cost of rooting him out had grown unbearable. Soldiers whispered about him even within their armored camps, their voices tinged with fear. No matter the drones they launched, no matter the artillery they fired, no matter the troops they sent, the mountains returned nothing but silence, until a single shot echoed, and another comrade fell. Withdrawals began quietly, disguised as tactical redeployments. Squadrons reassigned, supply lines cut short, fleets redirected. But the truth spread through every rank: Earth was not worth the cost. An empire that had consumed worlds without pause was stalled by one man with a rifle. The memory of that fact would linger far longer than the campaign itself. They had mocked human weapons, and in their mockery they had revealed their weakness. Among humans, the rifleman's name was never known, but his legend grew unstoppable. In every village, stories painted him differently. To some, he was a soldier who never surrendered; to others, a farmer who refused to bow; to many, a spirit of the mountains themselves, taking vengeance on the invaders. It did not matter who he truly was. What mattered was that the Empire had been forced back, not by fleets or governments, but by a single marksman whose patience outweighed their pride. The rifles once ridiculed as relics became symbols of defiance. Men and women carried them openly, polishing the steel as if each weapon carried the ghost of the mountains within it. Resistance spread wider, small victories multiplying, the invaders unable to erase the belief that humans could fight back. Where once fear dominated, courage replaced it. The rifleman's echo became a call to arms, reminding all that survival did not demand equality of weapons, only equality of will. For the Empire, the lesson cut deeper than defeat. Their archives recorded the campaign not as conquest, but as resistance. Reports carried warnings about Earth. The people were not to be underestimated, the terrain not to be dismissed, the weapons not to be mocked. In strategy halls light years away, commanders debated the futility of returning. Their soldiers still remembered the silence, the waiting, the sudden crack that shattered arrogance. They remembered a world where their technology meant nothing. The sniper himself faded back into obscurity. No announcement of his survival was ever made, no recognition sought. His rifle became quiet again, resting in the hands of the one who had carried it through storms. He did not need fame, because his victory was written in the fear of those who once laughed. The mountains held his secret, and humanity held his legacy. Generations would speak of that time, when an empire learned humility and Earth remembered its strength. They would speak of how the invaders mocked rifles, and how those rifles became the instruments of defiance. Children would grow up hearing of the man who waited in the cold, watching, patient as stone, until the moment came when arrogance stood exposed and a single bullet rewrote the balance of power. The invaders had sought to define Earth as weak, a planet of relics and outdated weapons. Instead, they carried back a different definition, one forged in silence and precision. They named Earth a place of hunters, a place where even the most advanced soldier could fall to the unseen. To them, it was no longer just another conquered world, it was the planet of the riflemen. And so the story ended not with surrender, not with treaties, but with silence, with a rifle resting in the mountains, and with the knowledge that humanity, underestimated and mocked, had stood against an empire and endured. In that silence, one truth remained: arrogance is temporary, but patience is eternal, and the will to fight for home cannot be crushed by any power in the stars.